Radio Free Innsmouth episode 366. Finally got enough episodes, not just for a year, but a leap year. Part 2 of our Satan coverage.
The mark of Satan is upon them.
If you're unaware of Satan, well, besides being,
the adversary.
Satan is also the name of a British heavy metal band that started in Newcastle way back in 1979 and have been pretty consistently active under either the Satan moniker or other band names, been putting out some of the best metal music of all time during the 80s and into the 90s. And they really did not get the positive press they deserved for doing so.
You are all of you confessed idolaters.
Although this has started to change as we've gone through the 2010s and now we're midway through the 2020s, more and more of the metal scene has become aware of the existence of Satan.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
So in last week's episode, we talked about their debut album, Court in the Act. We talked about how they sort of turned into another band called Blind Fury for a little bit in the mid-80s, put out an album called Out of Reach, which was very much an effective follow-up to the first Satan campaign. Then they switched singers to Michael Jackson.
I can be Agent M.
No, not that one. Different Michael Jackson. They changed their name back to Satan. They put out the Into the Future extended play record, as well as the full-length album Suspended Sentence in 1987. And that was as far as I managed to get in that full 19-minute long episode.
정적이어가지고.
I don't know, I guess I just had a lot to say about Court in the Act. It's only one of the best heavy metal albums of all time. People spent the better part of the 90s paying thousands of dollars for it on eBay. Anyways, so now we got Michael Jackson back in Satan, and they end up doing the name change thing again. 1 year later, they changed their name to Pariah, and this isn't like with Blind Fury, where the members of Satan sort of gradually absorbed an already existing band. Pariah is a wholly new entity that is very much a continuation of the thrashier, more intense direction that Satan was going in on their 1987 album. Even to this day, I feel like Pariah is incredibly undersung amongst even a lot of Satan fans. I mean, their 1988 debut full-length, The Kindred, is an incredibly solid blend of the rising thrash metal movement at the time with new wave of British heavy metal melodicism and a healthy dose of progressive rock influence, as you can see with this intro. Then the harmonies hit you, and you're left with something that sounds a lot more majestic than any other thrash metal band active at the time. But they also managed to distinguish themselves via their very heavy riffage. It's like if Tony Iommi put out a Funeral Doom album. You've got these old new wave of British heavy metal bands managing to combine their late 70s, early 80s sound with more contemporaneous extremity without losing their identity. In fact, they managed to create something very new. And a lot of that has to do with Michael Jackson's vocals. Really unique style. It's simultaneously harsh and melodic, which is a pretty good description for this band in general. Like, check out this melodic thrash break. The heaviness quotient is comparable to a band like Overkill or Nuclear Assault, but it has this gothic sense of melody to it, which of course bleeds heavily into the lead guitar playing as well. Satan has always been a great lead guitar player. I mean, he showed that Robert Johnson guy what's what. And that was back in the 1930s. Now it's the 80s, and Satan are one of the top UK thrash metal bands. In fact, if you were going to do some kind of big three of British thrash metal, like that big four from America that everybody talks about, what was it, Megadeth, Slayer, Overkill, and Dark Angel? You do that for Great Britain, you got Cerebral Fix, Sabbath of the...
Oh dear, I seem to have spotted a cunt. Good day.
Variety, not the... Variety. I covered that band way back on episode 267. And Pariah as the big three. Then there's other bands that are a little bit below, not quite as cool, but still worth listening to. Acid Rain, Zentrix, Hydrovane, maybe the first Reanimator album. But Pariah might just be at the top of the British thrash metal heap, particularly when it comes to their second album, which came out only a year later, 1989, Blaze of Obscurity. I mean, this album, I don't know how it didn't get huge. Must have been a distribution error or something. Because you hearing these harmonies combined with that palm-muted heavy thrash metal approach, fucking fantastic. And then check out this riff. That's fucking sexy. Speaking of which, these vocals, definitely the best performance ever from this particular Michael Jackson. Emotive, soulful, and melodic, and yet very rough around the edges and harsh. Nobody else really sang exactly like this guy. Closest comparison I can come up with is the guy from Demon that I covered on episode 172. But even then, that guy was way more 70s-ish. Michael Jackson's like at the bleeding edge of 80s thrash. And because it's a Satan album and everything but the band name, the songwriting here is going to be particularly complex. These are long songs that earn their length by having a whole lot of very merciful fate-ish change-ups and different miniature song sections, like this particularly badass groove bit here. Like that could be on a Moonblood album, or maybe even a Bathory one. That sort of thing happens all the time. You think when the song is going one way and is kind of wrapping up, it manages to hit you with almost a second song, a second movement that at the same time still very much fits in the overall songwriting context of what came before. It's very smartly written thrash, and it's really surprising that Pariah didn't get big, even nowadays, even amongst fans of the newer Satan albums. Pariah should be mandatory listening. But that didn't really end up working out, so after this album came out, they broke up. Graham English and Steve Ramsey, the bassist and one of the guitarists for Satan, Blind Fury, Pariah, ended up joining with the former vocalist of the other big UK thrash band, Sabbath, to start up Skyclad, a band that I will admit I have a bit of a blind spot for. I've heard their first 4 albums, and I really liked Wayward Sons of Mother Earth and Jonah's Ark, but I definitely need to listen to them more. But yeah, you know, basically inventing folk metal, that's what the Satan guys were up to in the 90s. Except in 1997, when nobody was looking for it, they actually got back together and made a third Pariah album that gets talked about even less than the 2 Pariah albums from the 80s. Unfortunately, it doesn't have Michael Jackson on vocals, but it's got Alan Hunter from Tyson Dog, who are another very underrated and very cool new wave of British heavy metal contemporary of Satan. In fact, in addition to being the vocalist for Tyson Dog, this guy also did some backing vocals on the very first Satan album way back in 1983. Pariah's Unity. I don't know how most people feel about this album, but I think it's actually a really interesting follow-up to Pariah and Satan and what they were doing in the late 80s. Because it's not just a retread of that, it kind of does its own thing while harkening back to all that good stuff. It preserves that thrashiness from the 80s, but it's a lot cleaner. In fact, quite a bit of this album has almost sort of a progressive power metal feeling, mixed with Satan, Pariah's usual thrash. And man, this new vocalist, I think he does a really fucking good job. To my ears, he kind of has a Tony Martin thing going on where he's like a synthesis of Satan's prior 2 vocalists, Michael Jackson and Brian Ross. He's got a harsh edge, but he's melodic in the same way that Brian Ross was. And that absolutely works for this much more consonant, proggy, melodic, power metal-y sort of album. Speaking of prog, check this section out. There's a whole lot of whatever the hell you want to call this going on in this album, which probably turned some people off. I think it's actually really fucking cool. This new, clean, almost jazz fusion-y at times approach to mid-song breaks. The way that they write these very light and shade dynamics into their songs actually brings to mind a lot of bands from the extreme metal side of the spectrum. Stuff like Cynic, Afflicted, maybe even Opeth. But again, this album didn't really take off. I feel like they might have just been doing it for fun, you know, getting the boys back together.
Underway! Back with the boys again!
Rather than really having a serious go at resurrecting Satan. I really wish we could have gotten at least one more album from this lineup, because it sounded like they were doing some real cool shit. But we would finally get the long-awaited Satan Resurrection, the real one. Because around in 2004, some German fella convinced the boys to get back together and play a Satan set at some musical festival. And they all stayed in contact after that, hanging out, playing songs, eventually writing some new songs. And at the end of it all, boom, 2013, when nobody was expecting it, a third Satan full-length album was dropped, Life Sentence. And this wasn't no cliche, we're back, like lame-o reunion style album either. These guys were hungry again. All the thrash, all the prog, all the power metal, it's back with a new modern coat of paint. And you won't believe who they got back on vocals.
So it came to pass in the ancient days of immorality.
It's fucking Brian Ross, not seen since the first Satan album.
서비스를 영어로 시켜먹고 있는데.
You're right. I guess it's not that surprising. I mean, he had been doing great shit with Blitzkrieg all through the 90s and the 2000s. But it's cool to hear him back with Satan, especially sounding this fucking good. I mean, it's like he never left. These vocals are fucking outstanding. And they go so well with the apocalyptic concepts of this album. Like, right here. 2025? Fuck, that's now!
What the fuck?
Anyways, you got a lot of cool, almost King Diamond, operatic stuff going on, and these real crunchy, gloomy sort of riffs. And of course, some sick fucking solos, because it's fucking Satan, yada yada. Russ Tippins and Steve Ramsey always do a great job. And in an actually welcome surprise for once, the underground was listening, and this album was huge when it came out. And it's real easy to understand why, because you got these gothic, progressive, new wave of British heavy metal epics, but at the same time, they bring back a lot of that almost punk energy that was part of a lot of new wave British heavy metal. And they managed to mix that sort of aggression into some very sophisticated melodic heavy metal stuff. Like, check out the fucking D beats here. Just real high energy shit, but if you pay attention to the guitars, they're throwing in all sorts of weird chords, odd scale runs, bits of mixed dissonance and melody. And holy fuck, the chorus game on this album is outstanding. Check this bit out, dude. And then out of that punkish chorus into this crazy groove-inflected, thrashy heavy metal section with some weird, almost like semi-bluesy soloing going on over it. Life Sentence, outstanding fucking album. As have been all of the Satan albums they've put out since. And they've been pretty prolific, because since Life Sentence, we've gotten 4 more albums, all of a comparable level of quality. My personal favorite is actually 2015's Atom by Atom, which, from what I've read online and heard on the streets, a lot of people weren't as into that one. But I mean, I guess it's a free country, people are allowed to be wrong.
Cause he talk a lot of shit. He needs to shut up.
This album in particular put forward this interesting mix of very anthemic heavy metal with a lot of dissonant, proggy, weird stuff that still managed to work in very concisely written songs. Like, how do you take a riff as odd as this one and manage to make it the basis for the catchiest heavy metal song since Grim Reaper See You in Hell? Well, you gotta be a really talented band like Satan to pull that shit off. And man, do they ever do a good job with this sort of thing. Managing to cram a whole lot of dynamic shifts in the 4.5 minutes. Also, I really fucking love the production on this album. I love the instrumental separation, bass very loud and clear, and the guitars have this sharp edge to them. Drums very poppy and snappy. Obviously, the vocals are immaculate. Like on this chorus right here, dude. See, they managed to take that bonkers fucking riff that started the song out and make it work as a catchy heavy metal chorus. I remember at the time I was listening to a lot of Vector, and I was listening to a lot of this album because they gave off a similar proggy yet intense and very heavy metal feeling as you're hearing right now. Particularly during these lengthy sort of structured instrumental freakouts, like this little harmony bit right here, kind of creeps up on you. Then they switch up their right hand playing technique, hit you with this shit, bringing out some of that precise tremolo picking. Like, obviously that's sick as hell. If you can't get down with it, I don't know what to tell you. Then some bluesy fucking neck pickup shit underneath a really interesting variant of the song's chorus riff. 10 out of 10, great stuff. All the new Satan stuff is amazing. We'd be here all day if I had to point out every time they did a riff like this. Or they did some crazy clever integration of guitars and vocals, like this bit. Shit, dude, that's so fucking cool. Then check out this change up right here. Like, you get the idea. Satan's been going strong ever since they reformed for the 3rd time, or I guess the 5th or 6th time if you count the band name changes and whatnot. Oh, last year they put out an album, Songs in Crimson, and it's one of their craziest albums ever. My personal favorite song on it, Era, open parentheses, The Day Will Come, close parentheses. Starts out with this great gothic emotive intro that goes into some real weird, bendy, fucked up guitar harmonies, then a bit of a descent into even more madness. I mean, what does this shit sound like to you?
아니 원스 여러분들이
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, bro. These crazy old new wave of British heavy metal geezers busting out some straight demi-lich sounding stuff up in this bitch, and yet they managed to make it work in a heavy metal, power metal, thrash metal sort of context. And the weirdness doesn't stop in that intro. The verses of this song, if you can even call them that with how intricately it's structured, they're using these weird hanging, fucking floaty-ass voivod chords all over the place. Here's another really good example of that sort of thing. Just they're floaty, they're strange, almost mystical sounding. And this pre-chorus build-up absolutely dripping with emotion, and featuring a great little quick lead guitar line at the end of the vocal component. And then this fucking chorus hits you. Just the way that lead vocal line is integrated with those backing vocals and that melodic guitar bit. Out fucking standing. New wave of British heavy metal is not dead. And it won't be for at least as long as Satan's still around. If you're gonna ask me, hey, where do I start with my Satan collection? What albums do I listen to? I'd fucking start at the beginning of the discography and just go through it all. And don't skip Blind Fury and Pariah either, because it's all fucking amazing. But there is one more band I wanted to talk about before we get out of here.
그러니까 엄마 아빠가 그거를 해주면 이게 하드렌즈니
No, don't worry. Satan didn't change their name again. I think the Satan name is here to stay for the time being. But Satan's other guitarist, Russ Tippins, aka the one guy that wasn't in Skyclad, who's kind of like the Satan guy from what I can tell. In 2017, he started another band concurrently with the newly reformed Satan called Tanith that plays sort of a very prog rock inflected, vaguely 70s-ish, but also very modern sounding sort of thing, with some real interesting interplay between male and female vocals. I'd actually say in many ways it's comparable to On Mioza from Japan and Hammers of Misfortune from the US. And if you're into Satan, especially the new Satan stuff, and you aren't listening to Tanith, you're fucking missing out. I mean, check this fucking riff out, bro.
Oh yeah, baby, like the big ass cigar, right?
Like, that shit's just fucking clean. Perfect heavy metal riff. And then these vocals.
Oh yeah, baby, like the big ass cigar, right?
I mean, depending on what day of the week you ask me, I might even like Tanith more than some of the new Satan stuff. Like, watch this lead guitar line. Fucking spectacular. Both the Tanith albums have a very unique feeling to them. They actually give off similar vibes to a lot of the less mainstream, more 70s-ish US heavy metal of the 80s, thinking of stuff like Ashbury, Winterhawk, Legend, but with that added component of the dual vocalists and just the insane way Russ Tippins is able to come up with these like cool fucking guitar lines and tie them into the vocal constructions. Tanith is fucking spectacular. They might get their own episode someday once they've put maybe one or two more albums out, but they're definitely worth listening to if you're into Satan. And if you're not into Satan, I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you. Like, did you hear the last two episodes, RFI? Shit's fucking bonkers in a good way. Hopefully you agree with me, but even if you didn't, thanks for listening or watching or whatever you did, and I'll fucking see you next time, dorks.
That's not good for my fucking health.